Okay, hi everybody. Welcome back. Do you have the roll call of everyone here? I think you just type everyone in so you know who's here. That's my understanding.
We usually they don't call the roll usually.
I don't remember.
We usually don't, but that's because they already knew who we were, but I'm happy to have us tell you who we are, if that will help you.
Well,
This is a new regime though, Myron. You want to call roll, call roll.
everyone, are you comfortable with that? Yeah.
Yeah, Karen.
Karen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Council.
That was a tough pop quiz.
Awesome. Do we have a motion to approve the minutes from the September 11th meeting?
I'll make a motion.
Do we have a second? Second. All in favor? Great. All right. Well, without further ado, I will welcome our judge to share with us some updates of how things are going in Clayton.
Yeah, so if you have the green light.
There, the lectern is on. Well, good evening, everybody. As I start my second term now as the judge for the city of Clayton, Stuart educated me and told me that I needed to tell everybody about kind of the new rules as it relates to this position. So the vote passed by whatever it was, 75% for the change in the city charter. I'm assuming that you all voted it in.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, so for this position, the major changes are, number one, the judge for the city of Clayton no longer has to be a resident of the city of Clayton. And the second rule is that it's no longer a 2-year term, it is a 3-year term. I don't know if that affects me or the next person, and no idea.
We clarified because we passed the ordinance that established those things in the code on Tuesday. And Kevin, our city attorney, clarified that like you'll complete the 2-year term that you just started. And then the next judge will have a 3-year term.
Makes sense, yeah. So, I have some things to talk about, but also, I'm here to talk about whatever you all want to talk about. So, interrupt me with questions, or if I move on to a topic and you want to cover some more in the topic that I was in, please interrupt me. I have, kind of 3 rules that I go by with my court, and that is, and you probably have heard me say this before, some of you have heard me say this before. It is compassion, empathy, and compliance. And all 3 of those, I think, can work together, and they have worked together. And we've had, I think, a pretty successful 2 years and 3 months, or 2 years and 4 months, whatever it's been. So procedure-wise, for court, let me kind of talk about the way we handle it. That's a little different starting with my second term. Number 1 is that I have an attorney call now. So we start court at 4:00. That's when the defendants are ordered to be there. But I have now an attorney call from 3:30 to 4. And as I say on the website, that time is for the attorneys to come to talk about anything, whether it's to take a plea or to address motions or anything like that. But one of the things that I make clear, and this used to be frustrating to me, and I know it's frustrating to the defendants that are there, they have me from 3:30 to 4. At 4:00, they do not get preference. The people that get preference are the people that come there and sign in. Some of the defendants that come are there for an hour, sometimes 2 hours. And what irritates people is when they've been sitting there and then the lawyers walk in and then they just get in front of everybody. And I don't allow that. So I think it makes it, well, it certainly frustrates the lawyers until they find out, but they're starting to understand that now. In terms of the way we handle the procedures in court, a lot of what we get are tags, no insurance, no driver's license. And what I tell people is that they can have really as much time as they need within reason to take care of those items. There's a variety of reasons why people don't have their tags. It can be because they can't pass an inspection. They can't pass the inspection because their car needs thousands of dollars of repairs. And I talk with them about, the financial issues. The same thing goes for insurance. With the rising cost of insurance, a lot of times they can't afford it. And with driver's license, it can be a variety of reasons. It's on hold somewhere else. Some of the people, I think, are probably undocumented, and they certainly don't admit it. But I give people as much time as they need. As long as they are showing up to court for their hearings, I will give them the time that they need to get whatever it is that they need to get legal. With the understanding, as I explained to them, is that you can go out if you're still driving and you can get a ticket right now tonight, and it's going to be, another ticket. So that's kind of the way I handle that. The other things that I use a lot of are community service. I usually give people an option of community service for, frankly, any financial fine that they get. It's usually calculated out at about $15 an hour. So if somebody gets, tags, which is an $84 charge, and it's a non-moving, it's 5 hours of community service, and we go through, how much time they need for whatever the number of hours are. And we also use a payment plan. So, and I work with the people on, what they can do monthly to pay us. And that's kind of the way things work procedure-wise, in the court. Before I move on to how do I deal with it when they don't show up, are there any questions regarding this part of it?
I'm just curious, how common is it for municipal courts or to offer the option of, like service hours in lieu of?
I don't know the answer to that. I mean, one side note, you're familiar with Art City Defenders, I think.
Yeah,
They do a lot of things, and they have a court monitoring department, I guess is what you would call it, where they go and they actually observe the courts. I am now the first judge to be on the court watch team, and I've been designated the city of Delwood. So I will be going to Delwood and finding out if they're doing what they should be doing under SB 5 and reporting back to the people at Art City Defenders. But in terms of the number of courts that are offering it in St. Louis County, I don't know the answer to that. I hope it's more than us, but I don't know.
how did you come up with the idea then?
Of community service?
Yeah.
I don't remember. I guess
You just
I-
got the idea. I mean,
I
it's
don't
the,
remember how I came up
Yeah.
with, I didn't come up with the idea, but I
Yeah.
don't remember where I got the idea.
okay.
Yeah,
How do you validate the service?
yeah, that can be a challenge at times. So we have a couple of issues which I'll talk about when I get to the other aspect of this. Sometimes they don't come back and give us what they're supposed to give us. If you get 5 hours and I give you 60 days to do it, and they don't come back, and then it comes in front of me, and then I have to decide what I'm going to do. That happens at times. The other thing that happens at times are we get the proof, and there's something about it that we call into question. And we've had that a few times where we don't think it was valid. And so I'll do a further investigation. The first thing that I'll do is I'll do an internet search to find out about this company, or there'll be phone numbers on there. I'll do an internet search, or there'll be an email, and I'll do an internet search, and we'll determine that it's not valid. So then we make contact with the person and we tell them, we're going to give you one more chance. We're not accepting this one. And they either do it and then it becomes what appears to be valid. I mean, if you get something from Goodwill and it's signed by a supervisor, it's pretty clear. But, last week or the week before, we got one from this company or organization, association, whatever you want to call it. And I never heard of it before. And I looked on the internet. There's no such place. It doesn't exist. So we had to do some emailing, and they finally essentially admitted that it wasn't valid. And so they said, well, can we just pay the fine? So, it does require a lot of work, but it's worth it. Those are a small number of the situations.
Great, thank you.
Okay, all right. Anything else on that?
Yeah, another question. On the undocumented people that come before you, are you obligated to to do anything about that? To alert authorities
No.
or? Okay,
No.
You
I'm
don't,
obligated to stay out of it.
okay.
I'm obligated to, as the judge in Wisconsin did, let the people out the back door. If they were to come in, unfortunately, I'd have to let them do their job. But I don't have an obligation to do anything. First of all, I don't know that they're.
I was gonna say, you don't
I don't know. No,
You're not
no.
seeing those cases, you might suspect, but
Right, it's all suspicion. Nobody comes in and says, I'm undocumented, but, there's some people that when by the way, we try to put all of our Spanish speaking as much as we can on the first docket of the month, and then we have a paid translator there for all of them. There are times when they show up on the second hearing of the month and I have to use my phone translator. Or there are times when they're not Spanish speaking, they're speaking something else and I still have to use it. And that does happen. But I have no idea. Some of them, when they say I can't get a license, I don't have a social security number. Pretty good guess.
Yeah, no, I'm glad you're not obligated to.
Right,
To do
right.
anything.
But I tell them, look, you have to have a license, if you're going to operate a motor vehicle in the state of Missouri, you have to have a license. We can send you to different resources if you don't know how to do that, but you need to do that. Okay,
Is
anything
that,
else?
well, maybe this is out of your purview, but is that true for the police force too? Are they obligated to hand?
I don't believe so.
Okay.
I don't believe so. No, I don't believe so. I think, between state and federal, I'm not sure. I don't think they do.
I can answer that because I met with,
Because you're undocumented or?
yeah. No.
No.
Yeah, I didn't think
Plain
so.
they don't.
I think you'd see a lot more of this obligated, a lot more things that we would see out on.
we're not involved in investigating and enforcing.
Correct.
Would be we're not involved in investigating or enforcing immigration law as a municipality. Like that is not
City
within
or
our
state,
purview.
right.
Yeah.
I do have a quick follow-up question about the interpreters in situations where maybe someone appears for a docket and there is no interpreter there, or that, if there's a Spanish interpreter, but someone speaks Chinese. Have you ever had any instances where you were unable to do your job because of a language barrier, or were you always able to make do?
Always able to make do. If there are times when I ask them to just come back when I know that my translator is going to be there. They show up on the second of the month, the second hearing of the month, and we really do need to have a conversation more than just me typing into my translator on my phone. I'll have them come back. Very rarely is it somebody that is different language than. I have had some Armenian, I have had Mongolian once in a while, and we're able to actually get through what we need to get through. It doesn't happen very often, but we're able to get what we need to get done. Anything else? Okay, so after court, I think we're getting a better turnout than maybe 2 years ago, but there's still a fair amount of people that don't show up. We have a docket. So right now we have 3,066 as of today, 3,066 cases in the city of Clayton court. So every docket is somewhere around 300 to 350 cases. We get probably
I'm sorry, can you say 3,000
3,066
cases?
total citation.
Each time you hold court, you try to see how many cases?
Well, the docket has between 300 and 350 cases. Yeah, but only 10 to 15% show up.
Yeah, okay.
So we might get 50 people there. Now, I will tell you that it is more. Is it a huge number? No, but we are getting a little bit of standing room only now because we're limited as to how many people can be there because of the fire rules. And we are having nights where their people are actually standing up. So we're getting more people there. Why is it? I hope it's because of a kindler, gentler, and that they, the word is getting out. But I really don't know. So after we have our court in the next 24 to 48 hours, I will have a stack on my desk. It's about this big, and that is every single case where they didn't show up. And I have to go through every single one of them and make decisions. So here's kind of the decision process that I go through. This is, of course, the warrant aspect of it. About upwards of 10% of those cases, there'll actually be attorneys that represent the defendants. And unfortunately, those are attorneys that also didn't show up, and which is very frustrating for me. And we do have court where defendants show up and they're represented by counsel and their lawyers don't show up. And I tell them at the beginning, if you don't see your lawyer here, please go out in the hallway and contact him. And then they'll come forward and they'll say, I've called him. He won't return my phone calls. He won't accept my calls. Did you pay him? Yeah, I paid him $5,000 and he didn't show up. It's incredibly frustrating for these people. So of that 5 to 10% of the people that don't show up, the lawyers will get a individual email from me, every single one of them. And I will explain to them, we had court, here's the date, here's your client, here's what they're charged with. You didn't show up, and here's what we're doing. It's either we're giving you a new hearing date, we're issuing a bench warrant, this is what we're doing. So they get notification, every single one of them. For the rest of them that are not represented by counsel, they kind of goes into 3 different buckets, okay? So we'll talk first about what is the most concerning to me for the safety standpoint, and that is people that are charged with I consider to be the most serious violations. And that is assault in the 4th degree, domestic assault, DWI, driving with a revoked or suspended driver's license, or speeding over 25 miles an hour. Okay, those are the ones that keep me up at night. They get an automatic, no recognizance, hold warrant, which means it goes into the system, and then if any of those people are stopped, they are taken into custody, and they have to appear in front of me within 24 hours. How often does that happen? Not often. Once a month, maybe once every 2 months, but it happens. Those I consider to be the largest focus that I have because they are potentially the most dangerous ones out there. Okay. Let's go to the third bucket. The third bucket are tags and insurance. And I usually give them about 6 times to not show up. After 6 times, they get a bench warrant. A bench warrant goes into the system, and if they are stopped, it is bench warrants or catch and release, which is that they're given a new court date by the police. They come back on our docket, and they are to appear on our docket. Like I said, I try to give them as much time as possible. Now, there are times when that stack has some return addresses on them, and that happens quite a bit. And we do the best we can to try to get, current information on their addresses, but sometimes we just can't get it. All right, and then we have the sort of the middle bucket, which would be everything else. It would be, right on red. It would be speeding, any of the speedings under 25 miles an hour, whatever the charges are. It could be trespassing, it could be stealing, any of that. I give them about 3 times. If they don't show up after 3 times, then they get a bench warrant also. Same type of bench warrant goes into the system. If they're caught, they are given their new date and then they're released. Then we have issues regarding people that don't come back with their community service, or they're on a payment plan and they didn't make payments, or they haven't made all their payments, or if it was a DWI and they didn't do the things they agreed to do, like SATOP and Victim Impact Panel, they will get a warrant issued as well. Not a no recog hold warrant, but a bench warrant will be issued against them. And that's the way we deal with people that don't show up or the people that don't fulfill their obligations. I would love it if I could come up with another way to deal with it. I think this is the best way that we have that we can address it. I would love to bring the numbers down. Unfortunately, if you recall, I forgot when it was in my first term, but I recalled about 50% of the warrants. Was that the number, Stuart?
400 or 500,
No, 750.
more than that?
Yeah, it was 750. And the reason I did it was, and those were all either tags or insurance or the combination of the two. And see, because once you go into warrant, you don't have another hearing date. So I wanted to give them another opportunity to have a hearing date to clean up their issues. Now, how many of those got cleaned up? We don't have the statistics. I don't know.
How many cases were on the docket when you, or what
Started?
cases were there total when you started? Like there's
Total number?
3,066 now? Is that more or less than when you started? Has it held steady?
I think it's slightly more. I think it's slightly more. I can't tell you the number, but I think it is slightly more. I mean, we could look at it, but
Yeah.
I think we were in the 2000s,
Okay.
in the mid 2000s. Yeah.
Steve, I wanted to ask you a question. So the Clayton, along with most of the cities in the county, and to some extent, City of St. Louis, all belong to the Municipal League of Metro St. Louis. And one of their committees that I served on this fall was dealing with their legislative priorities. Most of them relate to tax policy, things in Jeff City, trying to impact property tax and sales tax, things that could have a detrimental effect on the city. But they produced a document, which I think was adopted by the league 2-3 weeks ago, with their legislative priorities for 26. And one of them is called failure to appear. And as I understand it, what it all sort of relates to is what happened back with SB 5, Senate Bill 5 years ago, and trying to make sure that more minor violations, the kind of things you're looking at, don't justify a bench warrant. But I think what I understand, to the extent I understand what they're now talking about, is a concern that the very fact, the suggestion, I think, from our lobbyists in some of the cities, is that the fact of someone failing to appear, that should in itself be a chargeable offense. Because if it's not, if you have a minor matter and you don't show up numerous times, it ultimately still will come back only to the fact that you didn't at some point have the tags, but the fact that you failed to appear is never really held against you in a sense, other than, as you said, you take the risk of continuing to drive without a license. So they are, I think, trying to suggest a legislative change that would make failure to appear actually something that would be chargeable, the subject of a separate warrant. I wonder if I appreciate all the efforts you're making, but any thoughts about that sort of idea in?
I don't like it.
Okay.
I don't like it. I think it just, I mean, there's a variety of reasons why people don't appear. Some of them are thumbing their nose at the court. I get that. I'm hoping that's a small number of them. I'm hoping there are other reasons, whether they are financial reasons, they're scared, they're not living here anymore. And, my concern of having an additional charge is it's just another notch against them that unfortunately can affect them later in life. I don't think that they need that. I mean, for somebody that's been driving, that's charged with driving, 5 miles an hour over the speed limit, they don't show up. Yes, I want them to show up. But do I also want them to be charged now with a failure to appear, to add, insult to injury? I'm not a proponent of it. I think I would love to come up with a way to get people to show up more than they do. I don't think I don't think it'll work. And I think it'll be worse.
Yeah, thank you.
Excuse me, if I could refresh your memory, Gary. I think it's probably a couple of years ago. Clayton did have such an ordinance.
We did.
And the commission was one of those things that I was involved in. We asked the council to amend that amendment to be consistent with the Supreme Court standards, that it would not be misdemeanor just as simply to failure to appear. So we've had that history.
It was right at the beginning of my first term. Right. Right. And I didn't know, to be honest with you, Gary, I didn't know they were talking about it again. I didn't know there was anybody in the community, in the county talking about adding that again. Because I do remember the history of sort of the 180 degrees of that.
Yeah, it's actually one of, they have like half a dozen things they really want to deal with. Now, this might be number 6, but nonetheless,
Yeah.
it's reasonably high on their list of things that they would like their lobbyists to push. So take it for what it's worth.
What's your, and I understand you might not be able to answer this, Gary, but what's your understanding of the league's position on it? Like, given the fact that actually we did have an ordinance to that effect, so cities who feel concerned about that could have an ordinance on the books about it potentially, but also then the idea that we think, it sounds like, we felt like it was inconsistent with the court rulings that we were trying to address in a responsible way.
I think.
Do you have any
It
idea
seems to
what-
be our Ordinance, and I wasn't on the commission then, but
Right.
to the extent we had that ordinance, I think it probably predated SB 5.
Yeah, it did.
And so, because I
Fact,
think
we-
under SB 5, you couldn't do that. And in fact, that's part of the comment of this new legislative effort is basically to modify what was in SB 5, to bring that back, because the position paper is people don't take it seriously because the very fact they don't appear is not its own offense. So that's the argument, and therefore it creates disrespect because people don't show up because they figure, hey, what the hell? It's not going to make any difference anyway. Now, I'm
Yeah.
not making that argument, but
Yeah.
that's what's being said.
We had proposed the idea of default.
Right. Well, that was actually in this, that statute passed, but then there was a question that was last fall, I
Right.
believe, as to whether or not that applied to the municipal violations.
Correct.
And was it, Ian Massey was going to,
A lot of it, omnibus criminal
yeah.
act that was passed.
So it wouldn't be bench warrants, it would be, default,
Many of the-
monetary default judgments.
Because many of the cases that Steve hears are really, technically, they're kind of, they're not criminal, they're not civil, they're sort of sit in between. And so why should they be punished more severely for failure to appear than the underlying offense, which may just involve a fine? So that's why our thinking, and also to clean up a lot of outstanding cases out there that Steve can't close. Issuing a default might be helpful, but yeah, it got caught up in.
That's all it's going to do, is it's going to allow us to close files,
Right.
as far as I'm concerned, but how it's going to affect the people out there. I mean, one of the things that I see come up, a lot of these people, they know CaseNet, right? Because they'll show up and I'll say, you're not on the docket. Oh, well, yeah, I saw a CaseNet, there's a warrant for me. Or I'm buying a house and I went to borrow the money and they told me that I had this and I need to clean it up. So there's a variety of reasons why they do show up. And it's one of the reasons why I'm afraid that if we have, FTA, failure to appear, and additional charges, it's going to make those people, it's just going to make their lives more difficult. Anyway, that's my personal feeling. Not that that matters. Okay, what questions?
I have a few.
I told you to test me, and you always have questions, so go for
Are
it.
are you going to talk about the housing piece? Because that's the one I'd also like to ask you a couple.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So, thank you. So we have housing docket one day a month. Today was my day. So most of the stuff that we see are either, um, lawn violations, building violations, licensing violations, things of that nature. As I was complaining before we starting today, it can be very frustrating because for the residential side, like today, we had hardly anybody that showed up. I mean, the city is there, all the inspectors are there, and we had probably the fewest number of defendants that showed up today. And there's really not much that I can do. There's no teeth in it. I can't fine people. I can't hold them in default. There's really not much that I could do other than give them a new hearing date, send them notification, hope that they show up. On the commercial side, it's a little different. We have a lot, we have a lot more that we can do on the commercial side. We had an issue today where someone, maybe not happy with the result, not me, but from the city prosecutor standpoint. So we have, more that we can do there. We've had a few headache cases, as you all know, over the years. We obviously had the case involving JP Fields that required to be demolished, and that case actually is still open because we're addressing issues of the property owner keeping up the property. We had issues with the World Trade Center building, which I think you're familiar. Hopefully that's going to be sold and fixed problem, whether it's going to be torn down or whatever they're going to do with it. We've had some residential issues that we've had on the docket for quite some time that are starting to clean up. So we do get a lot of variety of issues there.
Can you say,
Go ahead, Becky.
can you say more about why you feel like you don't have
Power to do anything with the
powers
Mhm.
with residential?
The laws don't allow it. I mean, I can't find anybody if they're not there. Right? I can't, I'm not allowed to issue bench warrants or any kind of warrants.
Okay.
The laws don't allow it. And frankly, when it comes to, the financial fines, I'm very limited there as well.
Yeah.
I mean, it's the limitations of the laws of Missouri.
Okay, so that's and it's specific to the residential housing court.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Barry, you had something?
Oh, good. Thank you.
I have a general question, if you don't mind, if I
No,
go
go ahead,
forward,
go ahead.
something that we haven't really touched on. I know that we have a provisional judge who I believe is available to serve in any time that you might be unable to. And I'm just curious, like, if or how often that occurs and how that works.
I would say in 2 years and 3-4 months, I think she has probably been there maybe 2 times, maybe 3 times. The reason is because I am very organized and I sit down with everybody being my side and the prosecution side in usually late summer or early fall of a year to come up with the entire docket for the next year so that we can go over everybody's personal calendars, their vacation schedules, anything that we can to come up with. And so we will have, for instance, our 2026 calendar. We had that in place, I think, by probably August or September of this.
Okay,
So
so,
now there are times when things come up,
right.
and so at those times, obviously, I have the ability to go to Angela and have her sit in.
Okay, but it hasn't happened much or maybe hardly at all because you pre-plan around known issues.
Right,
Okay.
right.
Do you ever have to like cancel court for any reason? Like
I don't think I've
Does it
ever
ever-
canceled court.
Yeah, I
No,
didn't know.
no.
I'm just, yeah. Thank you. I
Yeah,
appreciate
Yeah,
it.
I would not want to cancel court.
Yeah,
That would not be good.
right.
Yeah,
Thank you.
sure. All right, Stuart,
Oh.
it's all you.
First, one comment, even before you, I know the courts had here in Clayton, the option of community service. I had personal experience with that, going back to when Mark Kruger was the judge and Darrell Kratzer was prosecuting attorney. So, they always had a list of nonprofits you could use for, so maybe you inherited that, but it's always been an option. What I wanted to have you sort of, explore a little bit with us. I think there's almost maybe a misconception that after a bench warrant is issued and after, I think, 3 years, it expires, that it's over. And
Well, it's not over, but that bench warrant is over.
That's, the bench warrants aren't, but the case is not over.
Well, no, so go ahead. I'm interrupting
Maybe
you.
you could explain.
Yeah. So when the 3 years goes up, my office then puts them right back on my desk again for the same consideration again.
So that case is still open.
Yes.
And do you have an idea, the numbers of how many cases could bounce back or in that situation where there's a bench warrant that may be expired or is going to expire and sooner or later is going to bounce back to your court?
3 years.
So do you have an idea how many cases we're talking about?
I don't.
Couple of thousand?
Oh, no, nothing like that. I mean, I've got 3,000 open files right now, so the number that come back, I would guess. I don't think it's a lot.
Is
but-
there any, now, you and I talked about this, there are cases go back 10 years.
Well, I've had them go back. I had a DUI the other day that went back to 2013.
Right,
Yeah,
so
2013. I've had some go back even further than that.
is there any, I mean, do you have any ideas for how to sort of clean up those really old cases that maybe at least 3 or 4 years old, or maybe more that
Well, 3 or 4 years in my court is not old. Not. But what I can do with those, there's not much that I can do. The prosecutor has more control over that than I do. I mean, I don't think it would be appropriate for me to go and make a decision that, well, these cases are just too old, so they should all be dismissed. I don't think that's appropriate. Prosecutor can do it. I don't think he does. Unfortunately, they stay in the system until something happens.
something happens.
Right. I mean, this particular one was a significant charge. It was a DUI. It was a 2013 DUI. And he was on a no recog warrant, and he did get picked up, and he did have to, his bail was set, and he's got a court date.
I think you might have touched on this earlier, but could you give us a sense of you have 3 buckets of bench warrants you issue. Do you have an idea of the percentages of the three buckets?
Yeah, I would say the most significant bucket at any one time is probably about 10 to 20%. 10 to 20% wind up being a no recog hold. I would say that third bucket of 6 or more probably is about 40 or 50%. Rest of it would be the middle bucket. One of the other things that my staff does, they know my procedure. So Rico a lot of times will call out when he knows that those are going to be in bucket 2 or bucket 3, and he'll just take them out and I don't have to look at them, and they'll just wind up back in the system. Yeah, the good thing about that is, they continue to get a hearing date, and then once he sees that a tag or an insurance gets to like 6, then it'll wind up in my stack. Or if the other charges wind up at a 3, it'll be in my stack. But there are times now they know what I want and they just don't, he just doesn't put them in there.
I think you and I mean, it's kind of assumed that people are entitled to minimum due process notice of the hearing. Could you explain, especially with the people you send out 6 notices to and they fail to appear, what your notice process is to make sure that people are getting notice of the hearing?
The US Postal Service,
Is that it?
yes. There's no other way to do it.
What if you get back a return person?
That's what I was saying. We'll,
Yeah.
we'll do what we can to get on the computer to see if we can find, a better address for them. For instance, if they have, an unusual name and it's not Bob Jones or Tom Smith, or we'll go across the hall and talk with the prosecutor's assistant to see if we can get a better address. We'll do the best that we can, but if we can't get it, we can't get it.
It's not certified mail, it's not
Certified mail?
registered mail, it's just.
You guys want the
mail.
cost of that?
Mhm.
Certified mail for all those?
I'm
No.
just asking.
No, no. They do certified mail on the housing stuff, but not for,
Not on that.
no, no.
So there's another issue you and I talked about, that it's kind of, it's kind of issue that just fell out, that you and I talking about it, but I thought it was interesting. It has to do with certified cases.
Yeah,
And maybe you could talk,
Yeah.
talk a little bit to the rest of us about what's happening, because what's happening is opposite of what I always thought it was.
yeah. So in Missouri, every defendant is entitled to have a certified case, no matter what their charge is. Now, certified means, and I don't get a say so, it is their right, which means that it leaves my court and it goes to the circuit court and it gets assigned to an associate circuit judge. The reason that a lot of times defendants or defendants' lawyers want that is because then they are entitled to a jury trial. And we see it a lot, for instance, in DUI cases, because they figure if I can just convince one juror out of the 12 of not guilty, then it's going to be a not guilty. But that's their right. So Judge Hilton is I guess he's been the presiding judge now since January 1st. He has a different approach to how these are handled. For instance, when a case is certified and it goes to circuit court, our prosecutor here from the city of Clayton goes with that case. So he has a separate certified docket where he'll go in front of Judge Snyder or whoever and deal with those cases. Judge Hilton and I met a few times recently, and he has a different approach. His approach is that the defendant has a right to a certification for a jury trial only. Anything short of a jury trial, the case should be remanded back to my court. So his position, as he's explained it to me, is that if there's a point in time when that case that's certified and the prosecutor and the defense counsel are talking about case resolution, different pleas, anything like that, is not to occur in that court. It is to occur in the municipal court. I don't know where things stand right now on that. He's told me that twice. He told me he was going to give that direction to the associate circuit judges. I can tell you that so far, I have not seen any cases remanded back to me that were certified. But when they leave and they're certified, they're beyond my jurisdiction. I have no control over those cases. So that's kind of an ongoing saga. We had an issue on a case that was an assault on a police officer, and during the art fair, not this year, but last year. And that case got certified, and there was a plea agreement that was reached. And let's just say that the police officers were not very happy with it. And that kind of led to this discussion about what needs to happen with these cases. We have a few other cases that have been certified that have been in the news that are still in the associate circuit court. They're not in my court. So I don't know what Judge Hilton's doing with those. It's an ongoing saga. But it's a defendant's right, because it was actually, it was actually David Gibson that came to me and he said, we're getting a lot, because it's a different contract. So I'm getting too far into the weeds maybe, but I always think that knowledge is powerful. The prosecutor gets, it goes beyond his contract with the city. He gets paid hourly, right? So David says, hey, we're paying all this money for these certified cases. What are you doing? And I go, I'm not doing anything. These are the defendant's rights. I don't order cases. I've ordered, in the 2 years and 4 months, I have certified 2 cases. And the reason was because one of the cases, the defendant was one of my law partners, and the other one was one of my law partners was the defense counsel. And yes, I could have used a provisional, but I still thought the optics were bad because it is in my court, and I thought that those cases should go to the county court. That's the only time I've certified cases. So, does that answer your question, Scott?
Anything else I've missed or?
That you've missed?
I've
I'm
missed?
not telling
I'm
you.
gonna say if there's anything else from anyone else for,
No, I think we've covered just about everything, but I'm happy to answer any other questions.
thank you so much.
Okay, all right.
All right, Stuart, you're next on the list for this law enforcement update. Brief,
I'll be
brief law enforcement
quick.
update.
And when I promise I'm gonna be quick, I'm always quick, okay?
We need that timer is what we need. We started a timer.
There it is, 3
for
minutes.
Public comment.
Let's
Sorry.
see. Yeah, about a month ago, pardon me, yeah, I met with Craig, our prosecuting attorney. And we had coffee for about an hour or so. A lot of it was just getting to know each other and understanding where each of us was coming from. What came out of that meeting was that Greg has agreed to appear before us in March, similar to Steve. So hopefully it'll become a regular thing where both Steve, Chief Smith, and Craig will make different reports at different times. As you know, I mean, there are 3 elements to administration of justice: the police, the prosecuting attorney, and the judge. And I think we need to understand how these things, these 3 moving parts kind of work, and they have to work together. And for us sort of understanding better how that impacts people in Clayton with the administration of justice. I think it's been very enlightening to me. And I've learned a lot, even though I thought I already knew everything. I didn't know very much. So, let me also move on from that. I don't want to go into detail of my meeting with Craig because that would take much more than, I need to do, and he'll do that in March. But I also met with Chief Smith like 2 weeks ago. Very similar. We went over the year's data for arrest warrants, arrests, traffic stops. The data was in a lot of ways unremarkable. There was nothing, different than prior reports. But once again, we went over much more than just traffic stops. We went over a lot of other topics, which I think Mark will get into when he reports also in March. He's also agreed to appear before us in the March meeting. So unless anybody has any questions or comments,
Thank you.
that's me.
You answered my question, which was, yeah, yeah.
You did bring something up.
You should go because there's people online to the.
You brought something up the other day and I didn't have the information, and hopefully you'll talk with the chief about this and maybe he can come here and talk about it when he's here. And that's your question about domestic abuse.
Yes, I was tempted to bring it up with you, but I know already you didn't know much
I
about
don't know the
it.
answer to it. Yeah.
Yeah.
So the question was, are we seeing more domestic abuse? As I told him, I don't see more cases charges involving domestic abuse. The question is, are the police seeing more calls regarding it? So you'll have him talk about that.
I'll talk,
Yeah.
also, the issue of, what they call it, doxing or, calls where, they false a threat to, a resident, happened to my brother, about a year ago, where, they made a false call that said there was something bad
Somebody was
going
there
on
with
in
a
his
gun.
house. And officials are getting death threats, things like that. So I just, that's another topic I want to go over with Mark, so.
Yeah, okay. I just want to make sure. Okay.
Yeah.
I will shut this.
Thanks, Stuart. All right, so next is immigration resources. I, again, apologize. I did not get to start on this until like a week ago. However, Susan Buse sent me over a website that had a lengthy list of resources. And I have circled in Joanna, and Francis already like amazingly is in contact with one of these resources, but something that needs to happen is we need to look through these resources, and by vetting, I mean we need to contact them and make sure, one, they're still open, two, what services they're still able to offer, three, how, like, are they apolitical enough for us to list? And most importantly, are they willing to be listed? And so I'm hoping I can get some help with that. Okay. Thank you. I appreciate it. One of the resources that I was referred to, Francis just also amazingly had already met them. So that's,
So it's basically it's free legal services for my, you're familiar with them, yeah. And so they were happy to come and talk to us. I thought it was great, which kind of led to my they touched on sort of how law enforcement has been dealing with this and how disparate it was across the region. Some municipalities have been pretty eager to crack down, and some have had very, very light touch. So I was actually, if we could add to Chief Smith's list of questions as to, how they're dealing with this issue, or whether there has been any, given that we have.
Or no talking without them.
That's one of the issues that I have talked with him about. It's sort of an unfunded, obligation, the police have to.
Is it an
have to work.
obligation, though? I wonder. That, I mean,
No,
that-
I don't know
that's-
what you're talking about.
Oh,
Yeah,
sorry.
what are you talking about?
Law enforcement within Clayton, and whether they're obligated to, refer people to the federal.
I would love us not to talk about this without the chief here.
Right.
Like, I just think.
Yeah, yeah.
I
Well,
mean, it's
anyway, my
very
question
clear
was if
what
we
they're
could,
doing and why, and
if we could add that to Chief
Yeah.
Smith's list of things to talk about. I don't know if he'd like to talk about it in a public forum also.
And he has sent me some material from Homeland Security telling us what our obligations are, okay? And the issue is whether,
I'm not
that-
joking when I
Yeah.
say, can we talk about this with the people that actually have the information and not speculate
Right.
in a public meeting about it? I would ask the committee to respect that.
Anyway, to close it out, that's what MICA
Yes.
stands for, yeah.
Thank you.
I think it would be great to hear from them, just like about the resources they offer, and as like kind of how the judge was here as like an educational
Mhm.
topic
Yeah.
for a meeting. Looking at our timeline, which I was gonna share with you guys anyway. I think believe it or not, April might be the next open meeting. So
Amazing.
I'll circle back with you on the April date and if they're available. It could be February, depending on if Dave is able to get someone here from the municipal league or not. He thinks he is. If he is, then we'll do April, if they're available. Anyway, I'll be in touch with you too about calling these places and figuring out, because I also don't know exactly how many resources we want to list. Like, too much might be too much, too little is too little, so I'll be in touch. Okay. Important is the next topic. Our January meeting has been combined with the school district. So we were asked by Cameron if we would co-sponsor their January Clayton Cares speaking engagement. It basically just means that our January meeting is going to be at 6:30 instead of 5:30 and is going to be at the Clayton High School Library. How this happened is that Ian Mackey had committed to us for the January meeting, and then that happened to be the same day as the Clayton Cares School speaking engagement, and they asked him if he could speak that month. And so he said, can we do it together? And we said, yes, we can. So, so that you all are aware for your calendars, January meeting is going to be at 6:30 and it's going to be at the library of the Clayton High School. Let me go back to what you're going to be talking about. So again, it's going to be co-sponsored by the Equity Commission. There'll be a little reception. There'll be the program. Ian's going to be talking about his identity, how that shapes his politics, and then really the bulk of it is going to be a legislative preview, and he's going to focus on equity issues and issues that he believes we would want to hear about as the Equity Commission. If there's anything specific that anyone wants to hear about in terms of pending legislation, let me know and I'll send it over to Ian so he can make sure that that is in his speech. He's hoping that this is a discussion more than a lecture. He wants it to be very dynamic, especially if there's students involved. And really the only ask of us is to help in advertising it once they have an RSVP link. Dave said they're going to put it on the Clayton website. It's going to be in the newsletter, but in terms of your networks, as it relates, feel free to share that information. It will be during our January meeting, free admission.
Is will it actually be an official meeting of the commission? Or is it
No.
more like an event that we're going to?
Sounds like
Like, how will it be? Will it be shown as a meeting of this commission where we might actually take votes and minutes? Or is it
I don't think so.
the meeting would be canceled and in lieu of the meeting, we would be attending this event?
Co-sponsoring, yeah. that
As
doesn't-
yeah.
That's what it sounds like, but
Okay.
I will confirm with Dave.
Great.
I don't foresee us being in a forum like this,
Yeah.
taking minutes. It doesn't sound like it.
That's what it sounds like, yeah.
And it doesn't sound like there's a panel of us asking questions of Ian either. We kind of just have the ability to think of anything we might want him to touch on, and I can let him know in advance. So that is,
Thank you.
yeah. Anyone else with questions? Does 6:30 work for people? I'm hoping with this much notice it will.
Is it
What's the-
January 8th?
That same
What's
second
the-
Thursday of January, I think it's
8th?
the 8th.
Or what,
I think it's the 8th.
8th of January?
Yeah.
Whatever the second Thursday is. It just happened to be at the exact same time as our meeting, which is how it got combined. Which worked out because one of our priorities was supposed to be doing some sort of educational event, so.
That's cool.
If you're not having an official meeting, do you have to take a vote to like cancel your January meeting?
Um,
I believe the chair can cancel it.
yeah. Other than that, just so that we all kind of have an idea of how, since I just said we don't have an open meeting till April, next month, December, historically low turnout. I'm hoping not this time. We are going to have a guest, named Paul come and speak to us about accessibility as he's experienced it in Clayton as someone who uses a wheelchair. I'm hoping he'll speak to, his experience in Clayton and kind of how that compares to his experience in surrounding neighboring municipalities, and if there's areas that he's experienced that we could improve upon that our neighbors have already done so, like how can we be better? And then Becky also was gonna see if she might have, I don't know if you were able to do that in the last one day.
Yeah, no. I've spoken to my friend who is an advocate at Paraquad and above the knee amputee about, but I have not spoken to her about inviting her to join us.
Okay.
And that's the December meeting?
Yes, so the
Okay.
second Thursday in December.
Thank you.
That's our December plan.
So the February meeting, you said
Possibly
is
the municipal league.
possibly the municipal league coming and
Mhm.
we would have the meeting.
We'd have the meeting and somebody from the municipal league
Would
would be
be-
coming to speak again about a legislative preview of what's pending and,
Okay.
We might want to
Um,
talk to them about what
yeah.
this commission thinks about the failure to appear.
Initially, the plan was to have them come in January with Ian, but since January became Ian and the school district, I wanted to move them to February, so we make sure we don't lose that opportunity. And then March is our law enforcement month. Hopefully April can be immigration. That's where we're at.
What is the municipal league again?
I have a really good explanation of the municipal league because mine will not be.
The Municipal League is an organization of, I think most of the municipalities in the county have a representative. The city is also a representative. Basically an organization that, tries to find common issues to discuss and opportunities to meet, and approach those issues. And as I said, they also have committees that do various things. One of them is the one that deals with the legislative committee. So that's essentially what it does. There's also a Missouri Municipal League, which is similar, but it obviously is the whole state. This is essentially St. Louis County and St. Louis City. And the emphasis clearly is on the county because the city candidly is much less involved. But almost all of the, 80 or so municipalities, not all of them, but most of them have representatives who participate in these meetings.
Is it fair to say that St. Charles is represented too, or is it just St. Louis City and County?
I have to say, since I'm only on the committee members are only from St. Louis County.
Yeah, I can't remember precisely who's like welcome
Yeah.
to participate, but it's like a regional.
And I think the municipal league, from what I'm told, at least, always reaches out to the city, but the city, to some extent, likes to do its own thing.
All right, any public comments? Yeah. Any comments from members? Okay, the next meeting is December 11th. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
I'll make the motion.
Second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. All right, thanks, everybody.
Yeah, like we can't motion or vote because we're not.
We're not, we're
Voting.
non-voting members officially.
So you feel free to like step up and grab the mic.
And also not, because there's like never enough people.